Welcome to episode 261 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Latest hardcover for Pathfinder 2nd Edition RPG line, Guns and Gears, is available now. Expect everything you need on the titular Guns and Gears in Galarian, including new ancestry, 2 new classes, heaps of new gun archetypes, backgrounds, gear, new gear archetypes, backgrounds, and gear. Joining us to break down all the Guns and Gears is one of the authors of the book, Pathfinder designer, Michael Sayre. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Great. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. It's been an exciting couple of weeks here, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you guys.
Is it exciting because this book is out?
That is certainly a significant contributor, yes.
I don't know if I've ever asked this, but what is the tenor around the office when a hardcover like this starts getting into customers' hands?
Well, it's hard to say because we're not in the office, but
sure,
there's
virtual office.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, kind of like peeping on the forums to see what people are saying and watching the early reviews and stuff like that. And, it generally kind of follows the mood of what's out there, right? And the mood's been pretty positive, so this has been pretty positive.
Yeah, small spoiler. I really like this book.
I guess along similar lines, what are the waves of excitement for a product? Because, you've got the design phase, it goes to ship, and then there's the kind of nothing phase from your point of view, and then the book's out. So how does that feel from your point of view?
Yeah, so there's this huge wave of relief when you put the last signature on the file and everybody's approved it and it goes off to the printer, followed by this quick dip when you always find one thing that you totally should have caught about an hour ago, but instead caught now.
Right, the wrong logo on the cover.
Well, that did not happen this time, but that is a good example of an instance where something like that did happen. And then you have around 6 to 8 months where you only think about the fact that your last thought on this book was like, man, that one thing I got right after we shipped. Then everybody starts getting it, reading it. Your world implodes briefly when they find that one thing, and then you're over it, and you get drawn into the excitement of just people getting into the book and talking about their new characters and what they're going to do with it, and that's always really cool. And that's kind of a nice high that hopefully carries you into the start of the next book.
I think I can anticipate what the one thing, or maybe something that you're getting feedback on, that there's it's a no-win situation. And that is that it's Guns and Gears, but Gears comes first as far as the content of the book, and then the guns.
There was an active conversation about should the inside of the book be alphabetical, or should it match the construction of the title? Because we definitely agreed that Guns and Gears sounded better, just kind of coming off the tongue, and rolling out of the mouth. And then we decided to alphabetize it. And honestly, I was just like, oh, maybe it's the right thing to do. Maybe it's not. I don't know. We picked an answer and we ran with it, right?
Well, it's also the playtest document was the other way around too. It was the gun stuff first. So
yep. Yeah. There was one kind of major thing that influenced do we map to the title or do we go alphabetically, was the siege engines, because we have siege engines in the book, right? And we knew that we wanted the rules to start out with the catapults and all of these other things and battering rams. So you had the really basic stuff and you could see it right next to the rules on here's how to use these. And then we were also going to do the black powder siege weapons. They were going to be with the guns. They were going to be in a different section. And you had to have the base rules first before we could upgrade you into black powder. And so that also kind of played into the many, many conversations we had about which one of these things goes first.
Yeah, I thought you were going for the rip the band-aid off approach for the book, because when the Gunslinger first showed up in the Pathfinder world, there was great gnashing of teeth and lamentations and does guns belong in my fantasy world? And then with Guns and Gears, it's like, guns? how about robot people? You're going to learn about robot people before you even see a gun. By the time Clint Eastwood the Goblin shows up on these pages, you're going to be shooting laser beams out of your hand that turns into a gerbil.
Yeah, hopefully we've got you thoroughly inoculated to weird, and then you get here and it's just like, oh, you know what? This is normal. Yeah, it wouldn't have seemed that way if we'd started here, but now.
I also like, this is the gunslinger that can use crossbows. So if you don't like guns, you can still pick up the book. But the book is 2/5 guns.
So many guns. Actually, I think the book is actually 2/5 weird gadgets, and then 3/5 guns.
Well, we've got a lot of lore, and we've got a lot of things that are just kind of, like talking to the GM and laying out tools and, answering some of the questions that always come up, like, how do guns fit in a fantasy world? What do guns look like in a fantasy world? If this fantasy world has guns, why aren't they just everywhere? Because guns are great, right? And like, that's all stuff that we wanted to talk about. Before even turnovers were coming in from freelancers, I was writing out some of these intros and laying down thoughts about, this entire book was concepted from the very beginning with knowing that there was going to be a very vocal and passionate segment of the consumer base who don't like guns in fantasy. And so we wanted to talk to them, and we wanted to be like, hey, we see you, we respect you. We are doing our best to make this book one that still has value to you, even if you feel that way, while also serving all of the very many people who do want these things in their game. So.
That was something that really stood out, especially with this book coming after Secrets of Magic, which is kind of written like, we're going to talk to you spellcaster to spellcaster, and you need to keep up. Whereas this one is really just like some friends sitting around and being like, yeah, we can have guns in our fantasy. If you don't want, it's fine. But canonically, we've traveled to Russia, so there is like Earth influences, but not if you don't want. Like, it's really chatty, and it's a wonderful tone.
Yeah. Technically, it would be in character for a ghost tank to be in Galarian right now.
Correct.
But honestly, that it is fun, and I am kind of glad you had some of that in here. But that if I did have one, like, this is like one of the very few criticisms, and it's so minor, is like it really felt like the book opened by apologizing for itself, and I really love that later it just embraces like all the fun possibilities that this concept brings to the table. And I do wish that it just did that right off the bat. Like Ryan said, spellcaster to spellcaster, mad scientist to mad scientist. We're going to make goblins explode, and they're going to explode sonic damage, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. I actually kind of agree a little bit. We that was something that I had a very long time between finishing this book and this book going to print to think about was I too nervous about what the people who were never going to like certain aspects of this book thought about this book, but again, we've got a lot of people out there, and I thought it was really important to be like, even if you don't like a particular element of what is in this book, there's still a lot of really cool stuff in here for you. And if you read about how we think about this stuff going into Galarian and spreading in Galarian and where it was and where it may be, maybe that'll kind of help you think about your own views on this matter and maybe evolve a little bit, or not. Either is fine,
So
I do like that
go ahead, Pam.
I did like that it very early on addresses like, would guns be balanced? Because at least that's something to talk about. It's like, if you are going to bring the guns in, how do you portray them in the game, and how do you worry about balance? And it does a very good job of like, hey, listen, like by the 15th century, plate mail could block musket balls. This isn't a new thing. We've tested, like, there's some really great YouTube videos of that being tested out that are worth watching if you are curious. And then also like, yeah, you've got longbows that can shoot meteors. Do they really care about a hunk of lead being thrown really fast?
So speaking about the tone and what you said earlier about the order that you introduced, the steam engines dictated the order that some of the information came in. Something I really appreciated was the sidebars, and how you would introduce like a concept like, say, the Sterling Dynamo, which is an archetype that really specializes in prosthetics, which are rules that are later in the book, but you give us a nice handy sidebar that it's like to contextualize these rules here so that when you get to, like, you'll get enough to understand this archetype, and when you get to those rules, you'll really understand it with no need to go back. And it just felt like consistently, like, there was the vehicle driver archetypes that also you had a couple of vehicle sidebars. Like, it was really intuitive, the order of information in this book.
I'm really glad. You know, one of kind of my roles on the design team, one of the things that I do is I always try to come back around when we've discussed a thing and we've all put our designer thoughts in, and then I try to just be like the player who is picking this book up for the first time and thinking about all of the many books that I've picked up over the years, and which ones were the ones where I was like, oh, I love this, and which ones were the ones where I had to learn to love it because it took me a while to figure out where all the pieces were, you know. And so very much I think that went into, you know, I outlined this book, I planned everything that was going to be in it, right down to where we were going to talk about stuff. And so that was kind of a constant thought in my mind, is I'm the player, I'm holding this book, where is the flow, how is it pointing me to the things I want, and do those all connect in a way that is going to make this a good experience and not leave me like frustratedly flipping back to the gloss decks constantly.
I'm curious about that because you made some really, I'm going to say the word interesting choices, and I'm not saying good or bad, but you open up the book that says, hey, this is a book that's actually 3 books that we crammed into one cover. You've got the gears section, you got the guns section, and then you've got the other section, the fluffy, wonderful gear stuff. The rotating gear, which is like really good. I really like the rotating gear section. And why did you decide to like break it up like that instead of having, here's all the character options, here's all the equipment stuff, here's all the lore stuff, like crammed together? Like, why this siloification of our technology?
You know, part of that was because I think for most of us who were working on this book, these are all kind of the same field of subject, right? You know, I tell it to people sometimes, I'm like, when I think of fantasy, some of my earliest fantasy influences were games like Shining Force and some of the earlier Fantasy Stars and games like that, right? Where like fantasy just has a little splash of, you know, the tech, and sometimes there's the, you know, the ancient civilization that was really high tech, and now you're a fantasy world that's finding the bits and pieces of it. But for other people, fantasy is maybe a little bit more of a specific box. And so this 3-book idea, I was actually looking at 3-5 Tome of Magic. I don't know if you remember that book, and it's got, you know, true naming and shadow magic and binding, and each of these is their own separate section with their own, you know, page treatment and everything. And I was like, that would be a really cool way to kind of tackle this, is identify what kind of the individual flavors that, you know, make up this this sorbet of mechanics are, and put them in a way so that if you only want this particular flavor and not all the flavor, it's really easy for you as a GM to be like, all right, we have guns, this is going to be, you know, a high seas adventure pirate game, and I definitely want black powder pistols and stuff, but I don't want any clockworks. They don't make any sense in this. We don't need any of that. And so the GM can kind of identify a specific piece of the book, and the player can also very easily get to that same piece of the book. And the lore of all this was really important. I honestly think the rotating gear is kind of one of the most valuable parts of this book, even if it's not necessarily the sexy one that everybody went running to immediately when they got their PDF or when things went live on Archives of Nethys, because that's the one where you really see like, oh, this is how these things are fantasy. This is why clockworks are fantasy, and this is where they fit in a fantasy world in a way that makes sense. And the same thing with guns and everything else. You know, it was really important for this book that with almost every piece of art, you look at it and it feel like you're still in Galarian, it not feel like a new world that is different than the world we've been showing you up to this point. I maybe broke that rule just a tiny bit with a particular half pager that I put in there, because during the playtest, a Pathfinder Society scenario had dropped called a Frosty Mug. And we did a lot of playtesting in that adventure because it was really cool. It was at a higher level, where it was, data that we don't necessarily get a lot of during playtests normally. And quite a few fans also picked up this adventure as well. And so I kind of wanted to acknowledge this shared playtest experience. The long and the short of it is that is why there is a picture of a dwarf rocket jumping away from a laser bear in the guns section.
I was wanting to know what the context of. So what page is that again? I need to go there now.
That is in the 113. That is page 113.
Yeah. Okay.
When you just started telling the anecdote that this is a piece of art I need to explain, it's like, I think I know which piece of art he's going to talk about.
All right. Yeah. It's like, because I kept looking at the pages around here. I was like, what does this have to do with it? It's awesome, but why?
Yeah, that is the black powder boost feat, which is immediately to the picture's left. It is framed right next to the feat that is involved. The bear is maybe with less context and could have used some more.
Considering Warlock is wondering what the artist's reaction was to the art order.
I don't know. I am not the person to ask. I imagine excitement, but I might just be projecting how I would feel onto the moment.
Well, since we're on the subject of art, this is another gorgeous book. I love the framing. Did you have any insight into that? Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's technological, kind of has a Skyrim dwarf technology vibe to it.
The actual borders.
Yeah, the framing.
Yeah. We wanted every section to have its own border that kind of spoke to that section's tone, and also so that it's real easy as you're flipping through to know when you've hit the section that you want. So we had planned those literally before we even started sending out work orders to freelancers. We want something that looks gearsy, that's got a lot of, like brass and bronze and clockworky looking stuff for the gears section. And we want something that really says guns and is in a very distinct, separate color palette from the gears section. And then since the last section is this gazetteer that's talking about all these places in Golarion, maybe we have something kind of atlasy looking, or, the cartography tools looking. And really, that was the kind of guidance that I tossed over to art and was like, do your magic. And they came back with these borders and I was just blown away. I particularly like the guns border, how you've got the stacks of black powder barrels and you've got the gun at the top shooting across the page. And Sonia did some really cool stuff with some of the framing for like the archetypes, where some of the archetypes are like standing on the barrels of the frame. She managed to line them up so it just looks really good,
I had not noticed that, and now I'm quickly flipping through the pages. Oh, there's definitely on page 134, the firework technician. It's a goblin crouching, lighting a firework, and it definitely looks like those are his barrels that he's crouching next to. I am surprised that there are fire elements in 2 of the 3 sections, and the one section that doesn't have it is the one that has a class that can literally explode itself.
We put in the art orders, and then it all comes together hopefully in a way that looks great. This book, had some adventures in its creation, and it was stuff that when you were on a very busy publication schedule, this wasn't really supposed to be my book, right? This was supposed to be Liz Liddell's book. And then Wizards of the Coast made her an offer she chose not to refuse. And I got to eventually step in when this book was a month and a half past due and didn't have an outline yet. And magic it into existence as my very first job as a designer for Paizo. I had been a developer in Org Play before that. And so yeah, this book, I was chasing its tail pretty much from start to finish. And that's not really anybody's fault. I think everybody who was involved in processes and conversations leading up to this was doing what was best for themselves and the product and the company at the time, and it all just kind of meant that we had a real bear of a project by the time it landed in my lap and we got to take off with it. I think it ended up working out a bit though. I actually kind of have a long background. I was in the military and my grandfather was a gunsmith, and so I grew up around guns a lot, and so it gave me some thoughts on how to talk about this. And when you talk about how it's got an almost conversational tone in a lot of these sections, it's because a lot of that is me or occasionally Mark just talking directly to the reader about the subject matter.
Now, I've had conversations with Mark, and when he's talking directly to me, there's often times where I've just got to be like, okay, now I need to digest everything I've just been told. So actually, how was working with Mark on this book?
It was actually really fantastic. I can't tell you how many times we bumped into a problem and Mark and I both ended up suggesting more or less the same solution to each other at like the same time. There were so many, we have the little bee brain emojis for hive mind, and we were dropping that back and forth to each other constantly as we went through here.
Aww.
And there were a few times where I went to Mark and I was like, I want to do something that's big and complex, and I'm a little worried that if we screw it up, we're going to make something broken. So I want you to like throw all the math, like really triple check me, and I will never ever be mad at you if you come to me and tell me that like we need to redo something or rework it or go down another path. I left my ego at the door while we were working on this project, and Mark really came in and lent me his experience, and between the two of us, I think we made a book that honestly, even our project managers were telling us this book should not have happened, and we made it on time. We hit the original ship date that was marked for this project way back when it was put on a schedule, a year and 2 years ago, I guess now. And it was really just kind of a unique fusion of the two of us being able to work together, me just kind of staying very flexible and open to what we could maybe investigate to make sure this book was the best it could be. And then Mark double checking me, serving as both a sounding board and a backboard to make sure as I was cranking out craziness and all of these ideas. Like the combination weapons are one of my favorite things in this book. And Mark initially was a little skeptical. He believed they could be done. He wasn't sure if what we were going to do was going to be the best way to do it. And I sent him a draft. He took that draft, polished it down, sanded the edges, sent it back to me. We tweaked it a little more, and then we ended up with what's in the book. The combination weapons, we might have had a couple of those that I think came from Stephen Radney McFarland, and then a lot of those we kind of made up on the spot as we really settled into what even are these weapons, how do they work. So you've really actually got 3 designers in combination weapons in Stephen Radney McFarland, even though he's no longer with Paizo. He still worked on this book and is in some other work with us, me and Mark, and I think that's why they work and why they're not crazy, and why we were able to do some things that in other editions were harder, like letting you use the same runes on one combination weapon, so that your gun and your sword do not become a massive, wealth drain that becomes the whole focus of your character, while still being a big piece of identity that you can have,
And honestly, I think that plays into a lot of what I felt when I read this book, that this was continuing an evolution of Pathfinder 2 that I've been very happy to see, where like early on, it almost felt like there was some caution. Like, we need to make sure this game is very serious. We need to make sure this game is very balanced. We need to be very careful with what we do. And then later, with some of the new blood being brought into the design crews, and also just some of the really cool books, even when you start to see like Mwangi Expanse, Secrets of Magic, and then this book I think is continuing the trend of, it'd be awesome if we have people riding meteors and exploding into the ground, and then like go full anime Gundams, and then we're gonna have you're gonna rocket jump with a shotgun while laser bears chase you, and you're going to be able to twirl your guns around so much that it demoralizes everybody around you, and you need a bonus on your next attack. And it's just like embracing the absolute like crazy fun moments in a lot of the pulp media that supposedly inspired this game, and seeing it, and you talking about even like the balance changes of like in a very early version of second edition, or even like up until the very end of first edition, something like that absolutely would have been this massive money sink that you all like would not have taken that chance. And I'm glad you did, because rewarding, like, all the options in here seem like things I want to do and things I want to base characters around, and there's a whole lot less of looking at this is like, I would take it, but I almost don't want to. And there's so much less of that in this book.
Yeah, you know, there's this thing that Logan is it kind of taught me, and that is a real kind of part of his design philosophy that I think has spread to the rest of the design team, and that's that every mechanic should have a story, and when you read it, you should know what that story is. You should see it in your head, right? You know, you shouldn't have anything that doesn't like give you excitement and give you this moment where you're like, I want to do this thing, and in my head I know what that looks like, what this is, and what it's going to be like when I play it at the table. You know, I like big, flashy, exciting stuff. You know, those have always kind of been the kind of mechanics and things that I've been bringing to the game as long as I've been doing it anyways. And I think that the design team is just so incredible, because each person on this team has a very significant strength. You know, Logan is this incredible omni talent who is very aware of what the story of the game is at all times. Mark is a supercomputer walking around in a flesh suit, and you know, always it can get you to the most precise, tightest, you know, what is the mechanical expression of this that isn't going to break something in the game. And then you've got James and I are very good friends, and we have a lot in common. You know, we discovered that when I first started working for the company. You know, he's Hapa from Hawaii, and, you know, I'm mixed race from Alaska, and he's got Korean aunties, and I've got Filipino aunties. And like all of these ways that we're on the two non-continental states on opposite sides of the world almost, and yet have so much in common. But then we also have these things where we're different. Like, we'll both be like, we should do something that's really cool and flashy, and that people who like anime will picture a big event in their head. And you know, and then I'll be the one who's like, but how do we also put the tone on that? How do we put the spin on that to where it's not going to chase off the people who don't want the anime? And just the chemistry and the bouncing of ideas that happen between the four of us is always so exciting. And I feel like anytime we really dive into something like a big new piece of crunch, like we had multiple times in Guns and Gears or anything like that, we all end up coming out the other side of it a little bit better, and hopefully a little bit more talented than we went into it. And I think Guns and Gears is very much a reflection of that. There were a lot of ideas in this book that made Eric Mona kind of give us all a little bit of side eye and then go, I trust you to do what is best. You know?
That sounds like a question.
It did sound a little bit like a question, but I will say when he saw the final book, he was incredibly excited and supportive about it. And he was like, wow, you guys, you know, really did some stuff that I didn't expect in ways I didn't expect, and I'm very happy you did it. You know, I think that was really kind of the first really big exciting for me, was when all of the people who had to sign off on this book for it to go to the printer had really positive things to say about it. No one was like, I can't believe we did this, or, you know, I'm glad we at least got the APG out of the way first, or you know, there was no negative energy from really anybody. Everyone was really excited about the doors we had opened and the way that we had opened them by putting everything kind of into the context of Galarian. So, yeah.
Param, can you call up the Mercial art on page 86?
Of course.
Is that the wind-up wings?
Nope. Try again.
I'm just going to check my book.
Well, no, it's
what
the
page?
Clockwork Diving Suit, 86.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So what I
That's good.
especially like about this is that that's kind of the face I had reading a lot of these options, and it's also the face I pictured my PCs having using a lot of these options. And so this piece of art really stood out as like, this is the mission statement of this book. Like, if you are not smiling ear to ear when you're reading through these pages, I don't know what you want at a Pathfinder, but this is it for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also felt like this felt like these were society characters, because I have played with some of these wacky people in society. Absolutely.
I did come from organized play. Being an organized play developer was my my first step into the company, and there were several people who came from the organized play community who worked on this book. And I think that affects how I think of the game. A lot of people, when they come at Pathfinder, it's the other Dungeons and Dragons, right? But I think if you come from org play, Pathfinder is Galarian, and Pathfinder is big and bombastic and sometimes pretty weird and pushing the edge of what fantasy is. And I love that. That's the thing that I've always liked about Pathfinder, is just how big and wild it is. I remember the first edition core rulebook, picking that up, and all the gnomes with anime hair, and like these really kind of big feats, and the game has just kept taking steps forward little by little away from this kind of Tolkien baseline into a world and a game that is very much, I think, the game that everybody has really been playing for quite some time. We always used to say in org play, this is a living campaign. The things you do shape it. We have reporting data, and we would look at stuff like that. And I think Guns and Gears is a reflection of the fact that Pathfinder is a living game set in a living world.
In Pathfinder and org play and PF2 reflects that it would not be at all unusual for a samurai, Gandalf, Conan the Barbarian, and a gunslinger from Arcadia to just shuffle up to a mission and blast the crap out of a laser bear.
Yep. Very close to what happened during one of our playtest games.
I mean, I used to always say that one of the common criticisms of Galarian is that it was a kitchen sink setting, and my biggest praise for it is it's the best kitchen sink setting.
Yeah, I agree, and I actually, my journey into Pathfinder, it took me a while to get to Galarian. And part of that was because I started with a third-party campaign setting, because I was just looking for aquatic combat rules for 3.5 that were a little bit more robust than what was first-party was available, and that introduced me to Illyria Publishing. So Cerulean Seas introduced me to Pathfinder, and then eventually Pathfinder introduced me to Galarian. And at first I was kind of the same thing, where I was like, oh, this is a really kind of kitchen sinky setting. I'm not sure I'm feeling it. And then organized play is what helped Galarian click for me and help me like experience it from the eyes of someone who lives there. And I'm like, oh, this is great. This is the best thing.
Yeah. And I think that for a lot of times, the kitchen sink setting was used as an excuse so that you could have these very different, distinct styles of games happen and still sell the product to people. It's like, oh, you want Transylvanian style Castlevania stuff, you can do that here. But like the blending was like always like oftentimes like even discouraged or stuff. But like Galarian just like grabs it. It's like, no. And my Frankenstein monster is going to grab a clockwork dragon monster gun and then sell it across the seas on a pirate ship. And that's going to be a great adventure.
You got to get the backsplash to match the kitchen sink, and then you get the countertops, and eventually you've got the whole kitchen. And it's a variety of colors and textures, but it all works together.
And it also helps to do the mission statements and the answer, like where you all have like very much lived and breathed that like cultural diversity makes everything better. And Galarian, as this humongous melting pot of so much mythology put together and helping and playing off of each other, proves that this would not be possible if you all hadn't embraced so much different myths from different cultures and not just stuck with the traditional fantasy Tolkien stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And and you know, I think that was something that really came out in the gun section when we started doing stuff like the beast guns and you know, really diving into the Arcadia stuff, was the idea of like, you know, we need to do some stuff that's I did not think at the time. People have made a lot of Monster Hunter comparisons. I am very new to the Monster Hunter franchise, in part because of the comparisons people were you know, making between these beast guns and these other stuff, and I was like, oh, I kind of see it. I dig it. Yeah, you know, but part of it was just you know, Luis, myself, Daigle, you know, Arcadia has drawn a lot on American mythology, you know, indigenous American mythology, and but also other elements of American mythology that maybe are really that kind of unique blend that the Americas have of mythologies drawn from all over, you know. Interpreting that into Galarian, and then by doing so making Galarian richer and more diverse, which is, I think, a journey it's constantly taking, and you're right, it's what makes it so fun. Looking at what kind of guns might be in different areas, how these things might grow, what happened in the real world, what could have happened in the world of Galarian, is how, you know, we have fire lances and hand cannons, and then these beast guns and star guns, and
the star guns.
You know, I am making no promises other than the fact that Luis and I are both like, every time a meeting happens where someone says, and what books should we put on the schedule? Luis and I are like, Lost Omens Arcadia, Lost Omens Arcadia. You know, I don't think we're done there. This book cracked that door open, and we were like, they've got beast guns, they've got all kinds of traditions, they've got air repeaters, here's some history, here's some timelines. Literally, we are just cracking the door open so that hopefully sometime later we can really come in and blow that out. But this book is the deepest look we've ever taken at Arcadia as well. You know, Guns and Gears is also has more information on parts of Galarian than has ever been talked about in any other book.
There's a area in Arcadia where there is this mystical ancient star gun that is guard with a code of honor attached to it that even the villains honor, and one of them is guarded over by a court of Fae. And I don't want to know what happens when a bunch of Fae decides, here is a gun, go blast some people with it.
You know, we were talking about the stories of mechanics, and my freelancers did such amazing jobs with the stories of these weapons. The Rowan rifle, you know, that was a combination of multiple freelancers, and then several, you know, development and other cycles, because the lore, you know, Ron Lundeen was writing the lore, and then we had other freelancers, you know, like Dave Nelson and Will McCardell, who were working on the mechanics and the unique guns, and Jessica Catalan did a whole bunch of these. You know, she did the haunted and cursed guns and intelligent guns. And, you know, my directions were like, here are some really kind of basic ideas, put mechanics on that, and then give me the story behind that idea. And I want nothing but good stories where people are going to be like, I don't just want that gun. I want to play that adventure where I go through that story, whether it be the creation of the gun or the ending of the gun, if it's one of the cursed ones, right?
Oh, this is where I have to do the disclaimer. Many people that on the KD network has worked on this book, including half the names Mike just rattled off.
And speaking of which, Luis is in chat and saying that you'll get him one day on that Arcadia idea.
We're going to look back at this book, and it's going to be like the Deadpool leaked test footage of Arcadia.
Nice.
So
this is a breakdown episode. Normally we go kind of chapter to chapter talking about the key mechanics. We've spent about 40 minutes just having a good time, and I think it's been quality content. But how does everyone feel about looking at the at least the classes in the new ancestry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, we got the Inventor.
Yes.
Second edition's first brand new class. It is a Tinkerer. It uses a lot of the options that we've got later in the book and a lot of the concepts that we've got throughout the Gears chapter to customize and create a war machine, a genius with a little buddy. There's a lot of different directions you can go with this class.
And a lot of smart choices with it, because one of the very first things you get with this class that will inform a lot of what we talk about later is you can reconfigure. And like very early on, that none of your choices are permanent, or at least very few of them are permanent. And so, next week we know we're going to go up against this thing. You can completely retool your kit out to be the perfect answer. It's like the Marshall version of a wizard with clockwork.
Yep. And, that was something that Mark and I talked a lot about as we were, coming up with the idea for this class and then refining the mechanics, going into playtest and afterwards, was we wanted it to feel like it was constantly innovating without creating this really heavy mental burden of you, the player, having to constantly innovate, right? And so that meant, like a lot of small things, flavor components, where like, yeah, you get bonus damage, and this bonus damage is because you're tweaking this and cranking up the pressure over here and releasing a valve over there. And, you're doing these things with crafting, because if you're an inventor, your hands are constantly moving, you're, whether it's pulling levers as you level this giant weapon at somebody, or maybe you've got a remote control for your clockwork, or maybe you've just programmed him to do a whole bunch of stuff so that you can pull gadgets and gizmos out of your pockets on the fly. The one thing that we really wanted it was to feel like it was something where you are always doing something new, you're always active, and you're really leveling your intellect and your technical skills towards being as good as you can be at any given moment in an adventure.
I played an Inventor when we were playtesting classes, and I loved that I felt really smart and like a combat machine. And that is not a combination you get from a lot of classes.
I am surprised that it does seem to lean on being a melee combatant, like a frontline melee combatant. And I think it helps and works with this class, because I almost expected this to be like a support class, like I'm Bard, but with springs.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of that you can do. It's got feats where you can whip up kind of daily gadgets, and those include things like a blade of armor, plating and stuff like that to help your allies kind of shake off some of those nastier hits. But yeah, its core engine is that it's going to blow the enemies up, and it's going to do that with its armor, with its weapon, or with its construct, and it's going to have a really big impact either way. And you're right a little bit, because it has so many effects that kind of center on the innovation itself. It means that if you're an armor inventor or a weapon inventor, 2 out of 3, there is a pretty strong incentive to be effective in melee. That's not to say you can't be a weapon inventor who just has a crazy ranged weapon that they blow people away with, but that's going to push you down one road. Whereas if you want to really use like explosion and these other things that end up centered around your weapon, then you do play up tight and close a bit more. I think there's still room in this class. Who knows? Maybe we'll do another book someday, where probably a Lost Omens book set in a fun place, like the Clicking Caverns of Tiansha, or, up in New Thassalon, or something like that, where we maybe get to see what some more of these look like, or what some different expressions of these look like. But it's definitely a class that is more of like I think I've used the word brain tank before to describe
Think
it.
tank is right there.
I know, but I wanted to innovate just a little bit,
Now, one of the core mechanics of the class is that this is like I said, a class that really rewards you for being frontline. Like, yeah, Mike's right. You can build a ranged version of this, or focus on the pet. If you wanted to focus on the pet, that's absolutely viable. It makes a great pet class if you want your clockwork golem to just smash face, and you just make it the best golem smash face it ever is. But with the overdrive mechanic, which is key, and then gets enhanced with several class abilities throughout it lets you have a character that its key stats intelligence. You don't usually have intelligence face smashing, but by using the overdrive, basically it lasts for a minute, and it's, if you pull it off, and you can use it once per combat. It's an activation. It's smart rage. It is Smart Rage. It's exactly what it is. Where you
Yep.
get to add a portion plus a bonus of your intelligence, or if you critically set all of your intelligence plus later on bonuses to your damages of your strikes. And it says strikes, not melee strikes. So this would apply to other forms of damage where you don't feel punished that, like a lot of complaints of this class would have been that it's multi-attribute dependent. I need to get con, I need to get strength, I need to get intelligence. What am I going to use intelligence for when I want to smash face? You use intelligence to smash more face.
That's right.
There was one small change from the playtest version of the class that I really appreciated, and that is that instead of a single armor, if you choose the armor innovation, there's now a second one. So the main one is the power suit, gives you high AC bonus, low dex gap. And the subterfuge suit gives you a low AC bonus, but a high dex gap. And it basically completely opens a new build for an armor inventor.
Yeah, it's your kind of like stealthy, almost your sneaky technician. You'll actually appreciate this when Mark added that in, and I was, doing my D2 and looking over it. It got me thinking really hard about an old G.I. Joe comic book I had read where Snake Eyes is like sneaking in the back of this Cobra base. And so he dives underwater and he's got a little gadget for breathing underwater. And then he pulls out his white phosphorus torch to like cut through the bars and, slip in underneath there. And as I was, looking over the Inventor and then looking at the gadgets and some of the stuff we were adding in, I was like, we should do that. That should just be a thing you can make your character do. That should be a fantasy you can achieve with this. And I love that, the Inventor does have that. It's not just the big beefy guy in the power armor, but you can also be a very sneaky, techie, kind of stealth engineer character.
Oh, if I wanted to do Pathfinder as like fantasy G.I. Joe, this is definitely the book I would need for that. This is not the only time that I look at an option and think G.I. Joe.
And to be fair, when some of the art orders for stuff that is not shown in this book, but that is in the Guns and Gears decks that'll be coming out in March, I actually reached out to you on Facebook, Ryan, and was like, Ryan, I need art of backpack weapons. Can you help me out? You're the first name that popped to my head when I was like, who's going to be able to hook me up with some good art references of backpack-oriented weapons?
Yeah. I sent you the first art. You were like, that's perfect. And I'm like, oh, you think we're done?
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Oh, man.
I cannot wait to get that deck.
Yes, yeah. You'll appreciate some of the stuff in there. There's a lot of amazing art. Like this book, I'm so proud of every piece of art that went in here. Those decks have a piece of art for everything that has a stat block, save one thing, and I'm going to try and sneak. There is art for that one thing. We just couldn't fit it on a card. It's the electric eel tank that's powered by the electric eels and lights a room. That did not fit on a card. That did not fit on two cards. And so when the time came that we had to decide what wasn't going in there, that was the one that didn't end up in the deck. So I'm hoping we can maybe like slip that art into a blog or something, because it's actually really cool art.
Oh, the art exists. You just couldn't.
The art does exist. Yeah, we ordered art for everything. Everything that's got a stat block, we ordered art for. There was just that one thing that we couldn't actually fit into the decks. And it turns
like
out
you have to
there
write
are very
an entire PFS scenario based on the electric eel tank.
You joke, but
I do not joke.
This is not a joke. I want to fight it.
Yeah, I could totally see using that. Although I'm leaning more towards like crime boss, right? Who occasionally like dunks an underling who messes up into the tank. Anyways, so Inventor, any other major points we want to talk about here? I know we've spent a lot of time chatting, and we've still got Automatons and Gunslingers to discuss.
So I feel like if you read through the Inventor playtest, this is that same class just cranked up. Like there's obviously more options, but the spine of the class is almost unchanged.
Yeah, and I think that's true about both classes. The playtest was actually incredibly positive. These are two of the highest scoring classes as far as, their average metrics that we've had on playtests. And so we didn't want to screw that up, right? We're like, people really like both of these, and these are ideas we weren't sure people would really like. The energy's so good. Let's just polish and refine. Let's not go in there and, screw ourselves up getting too creative when we've got something that people are excited about. Polish, refine, and then also the thing that, we always do following a playtest, which is add the glitter, the stuff that like we don't really need it play tested, and if it's in the play test it might be too distracting, but that everybody really wants because it's fun and it's shiny and it gives you that little bit of extra oomph to play with.
All right, moving on to the automaton. Oh, sorry, go ahead, bro.
The one thing I wanted that we only brushed on is the Inventor also leans into that these are not reliable inventions that they're working with. They're only kept operating because of their genius and constant tinkering. So one of the mechanics is the unstable mechanic, which we talked about a lot during the playtest, where you can get an extra boost out of a lot of your character options if you go for the unstable option. But there's a chance that when you do that, it's going to blow up. You still get the boost, but then you're going to take some fire damage. And you're not going to be able to do that again till you put the side back on it and hammer it a few times. And then also, that your thing is completely unstable and held together by chicken wire and dreams. So it mentions that every single inventor knows how to make their invention explode. And that's a core mechanic of the class that, boom! I need it to go boom right now, real big.
Just to warn you there, Param, you kind of got silent-y for a second, so hopefully your internet stabilizes.
It seems to be stable right now.
Okay. Speaking of Cylons, the Automaton.
This was such a surprise, and I love it.
Go on.
Okay, so the Automaton is this really elegant-looking construct with a soul that used to be something that wasn't this construct. And they're millennia old, from like back when ancient Assyrian was like their primary opponent. They're from the Gistka Imperium, which is one of the older and most technologically advanced. Like, Golarion is kind of filled with there were these ancient empires long and long ago that were really awesome. And they left behind stuff that will kill you. And you get to be one of the things they left behind that can kill you this time.
Yes.
And they're really elegant looking. I love the art. You have this like robotish body that is like super configurable. Like you can have laser cannons or really cool legs and lots of little gadgetry just built. Like all the ancestry options are just ways to configure yourself to do neater and neater things up until it. They're also kind of pseudo magical. So this isn't just like more clockwork. This is strange magitech that gets added together. And when I saw them and they were first teased, I was like, those remind me of Warframe. And then Luis Loza said, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, Luis wrote the Automatons, and I am fairly certain he was also either the developer and or the author of the Construct Handbook, where we first talked about Jiskin automatons. And so, yeah, and, when I was doing the art orders for this book, I had those great references that he made, and, the main kind of piece of advice that I dropped in addition to that was, every automaton's body, at some point in time, somebody wanted to be in that body, right? They should look stylish. They should look like a form that somebody chose, not just like a clunky machine that, was built to do a purpose for somebody else.
Luis in chat confirms he wrote the Automatons for Construct Handbook in 1E, then got hired and developed it.
Ooh. Yeah, they're really great. I like that. Like, it also gives you like reasons for roleplay. Like, you're very likely ancient. You're so ancient that you're going likely a little bit off because it's hard to stay cognizant when you're that old. And also, you have plenty of reason to distrust people because you're you are considered a treasure, and lots of people want you for reasons, and all of those reasons are usually bad for you.
Yeah, it turns out, when 10,000-year-old technology is strolling around firing beams of energy and being immortal, people get curious, and it's rarely good if you happen to be that piece of technology.
They've got a cool ability at like feat level 9. Rain of bolts. Once per, you can just you open up your projectile chassis and just pepper the field with bolts. And it's like one of the best damage abilities I've ever seen.
Yep. Yeah, Luis gave some really fantastic feats, and we talked a bit about direction and stuff. He had this fun idea for the enhancements and the augmentations that are in the feats, and that's kind of a cool thing you can do is you can take some of your ancestry feats and use them to get enhanced versions of abilities that you've already picked up. And you do get a very much like how the Inventor is a lot of customization and modularity happening. You actually kind of get that same thing out of your ancestry, which I thought was just such a cool idea, and was really excited to get the chance to work with Luis and Mark on making the best possible version of that we could.
Yeah, there's definitely ancestries that lean towards certain classes or certain play styles, but this is one of the most flexible ancestries I've seen.
Yeah.
Special call out to one of the capstone choices is you get to be Galvatron and turn into an energy cannon.
Yeah, I mentioned Shining Force earlier. I actually picture that as the laser eye, one of the most iconic fights from the original Shining Force game. But regardless, the point is you are an immobile laser cannon who can really mess people up. So
can I be chained to a bear?
I mean, if the bear's big enough, we can probably. We need.
We good moving on to backgrounds?
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
All right. So, as I mentioned at Gen Con, the rare backgrounds have become surprisingly one of my favorite things that we've been putting out since the APG came out. It's just what could just be a simple choice and can still be a simple choice if that's the kind of direction I want to go with my character. Also has the option to be this really inflated, really elaborate, character-defining option.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I remember you talking about rare backgrounds, and you were like, rare as in the backgrounds every player has always been taking up to this point in time. But I will actually say though, you said that, and I thought about that after hearing you say that, Ryan, and I was like, he's right though. Every one of these is the story that is like the story someone tells when they want that most, perfect snowflake of a character who has this great big backstory to him, and rare backgrounds are such a great way to do that. And so it kind of went into the rare backgrounds we ordered for this book, the Gears ones, stuff like discarded duplicate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. You're a clone. You're a clone. You were made for some specific purpose, and you don't necessarily know what that purpose is, but somewhere out there is somebody who looks exactly like you who does know what that purpose is.
And stories like that always end perfectly well and happy, right?
Right. Saved by Clockwork was another one I really like. I liked it so much I made sure we had that art for it. Yeah, where he's winding up his heart because he's got a clockwork heart.
And Wished Alive 2, the Pinocchio story. And I like that it's not like this is exclusive to automatons or construct characters. It's like, no, you're just walking around. You look like any old dwarf or elf or whatever. It's just you started as a toy elf or dwarf or whatever. And you might be the only one that knows your secret origin.
Yes. Yeah, that one, I've been given a lot of credit to Luis, but I have to note the Pinocchio origin story was from Luis during a brainstorm where people were just throwing stuff up at the wall. And the moment he said it, we were all like, yeah, that goes in the book.
Disney does all these direct-to-DVD sequels. They never did the sequel of What's It Like to Be Pinocchio Now That He's Not a Doll? We could play it out.
That's right.
He goes on adventures with gunslingers and automatons.
It's a 26-episode anime season.
There you go. Yeah. So are we skipping archetypes and jumping along to the Gunslinger? Is that the plan here, or
one question about one archetype?
Okay.
The Overwatch archetype. Why and why? It's cool, but why does super perception exist?
So I wanted something for this book that really played with the theme of your job is to stand back and see everything and then convey that information to your party members and have that really be the feel of the character, where you're almost like a Barbara Gordon during her Oracle stretch. You're that character where you're still a Pathfinder character. You can still shoot a gun, fire a crossbow, swing a sword, any of those things you want to do. But the real value you bring is information and perspective. That archetype went through a couple iterations. We got a great turnover from the freelancer. We polished it, hammered on it, rebuilt a couple pieces of it, and then just ended up with something that like you said, everybody who sees it is really like, whoa, and it feels really strong because perception is such a key skill. I think it walks right up to the line without going over because of the fact that its primary purpose is essentially being a perception based bard, right? So that's the story behind the Overwatch.
It kind of reminds me of there's a game I've been watching some people play and wanting to get into called Hell Let Loose that's come out, where it's a big multiplayer 50-on-50 map, but one of the players just sits in a room with a map that shows where the players are, but only their team, and it's one of the most important and powerful positions, and all they can do is speak on the radio with knowledge of where their people are.
Yeah, it's that battlefield coordination. We talked a lot going into this book about how teamwork is such a big part of Pathfinder Second Edition. When the book first came out, we would talk about optimization is the thing that happens at the table, not necessarily a character building. You can optimize a character, but the real punch comes at the map, and we wanted archetypes in this book that really brought that to the fore. The Overwatch is one of them. Another one is the sniping duo from the gun section, where you are the sniper and you take the sniping duo feats, and then you designate a party member as your spotter, and that opens up a bunch of abilities for both of you. Hopefully people dig the teamwork roles that some of these archetypes and options bring into play.
It's also not new. I mean, how long have spellcasting players known that one of the most two of the most powerful spells? Oh, no, I wasn't saying Scry. Good choice. Two of the most powerful spells in Pathfinder, regardless of edition, Enlarge Person and Haste.
Yep. Spells that do nothing for the person casting them, but a whole lot for their party. Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, it does a whole lot for my squishy wizard to have a 20-foot tall barbarian between me and the bad people.
So we were kind of zooming past the rest of the gear section, but I do want to linger on gadgets. So we've talked in passing and contextually about the different gear in the book. Gadgets are they're kind of like wondrous items in their abilities, but they're consumables. They're like one-off wondrous items, and that terrifies me. I see myself getting a bunch of these just in case and not using a single one.
Blast boots.
Well, if you have an Inventor with the right feats in your party, you don't need to worry about not using them because you've got your limits are only daily, right? So you can really have them cranking out cool, fun stuff that you can play around with as you go through. And even if you don't, I think they're kind of like talismans where you don't use them until suddenly you do, and then you're using them all the time, But yeah, I think like the blast boots, I want that in-game moment where somebody's Inventor starts, whipping out their daily gadgets to slap blast boots on everybody to get over, the chasm. That moment in time where we take that deviation from Tolkien and it's like, all right, we can go over or under the mines of Moria, but the passes are clogged with snow. We got this. We're just gonna blast. Right, the landing will be rough, but the journey there will be fast and swift, and we'll probably have the same mortality rate.
I've been playing a lot.
I love the art for the blast boots, because it's like, you mean it took an inventor to tie fireworks to the back of boots?
Well, to make sure that they were tied firmly enough and with the knots that would lift you, rather than just having fireworks blast your hair off and singe your boots, right?
Right.
I'm just glad that there's prosthetic feet in this book.
You know, there's an answer to every issue you might bring upon yourself.
I've been playing a lot of the Goonies adventure game, new board game, and in it, one of the characters is Dada that you can play as, and it's my favorite character because you just get this set of gadgets like the Bully Buster that you can only use once each. And knowing the perfect time to slap that down and like completely swing the adventure game in your team's favor feels satisfying and wondrous. It's why I like playing Batman Wizard. It's why I like the Pocket Full of Scrolls, the perfect one. That moment when you just got the aha, I have exactly the answer to the situation. And this book lets every character get that moment, whether it's the inventor or the gunslinger with the cool moves and cool feats, or it's just you have the cool gadgets and the treasure, and your GM has a better treasure list than most.
Yeah, well, and there's so much cool stuff in here. One of the funny things was we had some back and forth with James Jacobs where we were dialing in, like, what do we name these things? What is the point in time where we are no longer in weird kind of steampunk, anachronistic tech, and we're actually in just like full blown, this is sci-fi, which is where we didn't want to go. We have a part of Galarian for that. That's Numeria. Numeria isn't the place that this book is about, you know? And so there will be a day where we have the stuff where we just dive deep into the computer terms. But for this one, we tried to find names like the etheric essence disruptor, and these other tools that let you do fun stuff like mess up magic that's nearby, or electrostimulate your friend back to life, or whatever the particular moment happens to call for.
And I usually dislike character options and magic items that are only like, there's like this tiny little fringe instance that it's useful. But with these like gadgets, especially how cheap they are and how easy it would be to just toss these in to treasure, especially for the GM. And you can do the thing that every GM knows to do, where you get antidote. Hopefully not literally the room before you do the poison encounter, but like a couple of sessions before you plan to do the poison encounter. It lets your players feel aha, so you know you're going to have the giant chasm in like an adventure 3 sessions from now. You can have your blast boots ready to go.
And GMs, note that he said a couple sessions or a couple encounters before the encounter where they're necessary, not the loot of the encounter where you beat the golem and then find the golem bane scarab and are just like, you know what? Whoever wrote this is a jerk.
Somebody carved the scarab with its tongue sticking out.
Your players are going to feel like geniuses when they use the thing from 3 sessions ago.
Yep.
All right.
Gunslinger?
Let's move on to guns. Yeah, the Gunslinger.
All right.
Oh.
Param, you're the one that played the Gunslinger in the playtest. Why don't you summarize the class?
Okay, so the Gunslinger is a character that is really good at using one type of weapon. Crossbows. Also guns. And, you point and shoot, and it does the cool things. It's like Swashbuckler, but with guns. And that's funny because the Swashbuckler was the Gunslinger, but with a sword in 1st edition. But, okay, so you're a ranged focus character, so much so that you actually get an ability that penalizes anything that isn't using your gun or crossbow. Which is the first time I've seen this in a class design ever, actually, where the class literally says, no matter what you've got, no matter what other ability you say you have, it always has to be at least one proficiency rank under your gun. So you do get to be legendary at guns, which makes this a Pathfinder class that gets to be legendary at the thing it's supposed to be good at, which is wonderful. You're good at reflex and wheel, and you get to choose how you're good at gun. And every one of the 4, they call them ways for the gunslinger. Every one of the gunslinger ways had me wanting to play it even after desperately wanting to play the one before it. I've never seen a class manage to split me equally in 4 directions before, and this one pulled it off.
It wasn't just you. During the playtest, one of the questions was, which way did you play? Which was your favorite way? It was almost perfect thirds as far as how the playtest broke out. And, at the time, there were only 3 ways in the playtest. The 4th one, Vanguard, is, unique to the final version of it here. But yeah, that wasn't just you. It was true in the playtest as well.
And in the playtest, I played Sniper, and I only played that because I wanted to see if you could make Sniper balanced and fun, and you could. It was really good and fun, and I loved being my little kobold sniper in Arcadia. It was a blast. Lots of blasts, but only 1 per kill. So there are 4 ways.
We were in a couple of tight rooms in that playtest, and you were still an effective ranged character who keep himself the distance you would want to be with that kind of weapon.
So there are 4 ways for the gunslinger. What I have ultimately settled on as my favorite is the first one, which is Way of the Drifter. And this is your close range, mix 'em up gunslinger. You get to have a weapon or unarmed. If you just really want a killer left hook, you've got it with this class. And a gun in the other hand. And all of your abilities really reward you with like shooting first and stabbing second, or stabbing first and then shooting second, and its activated ability is when they all have this like cool ability that happens when you roll initiative, which is a great way to like really contextualize what like the fantasy of a gunslinger is they're always the person that is first. Like they're doing something immediately when the trouble hits down. That's always key with what makes a successful gun focused action hero, is they're the one that shoots first. And Drifter, you get to
I can feel you dead-eyeing George Lucas.
With Drifter, you get to stride into the fight on your initiative roll, which is just so cool. And and this is definitely a class where you're like, aha. And later on, it gets abilities that makes sure that it's the same. It's like, I don't care that I'm going to ranged at point blank range. And by point blank, I mean my pistol, your nose, 0 inches between them. And I love it. Then you've got the Pistolero, which this is your Western gunslinger. Whistling happens the moment that you roll intimidation. When you reload with the Pistolero gets bonuses for wisecracking and or intimidating when they reload, and when they roll initiative, they back off. So they're the opposite. They get to put distance between them and the targets if they want to, or step. It's a step, so it doesn't even provoke anything. You get to just do it, which is wonderful. And they get like the spinning pistols and the dual wielding and all that fun stuff. The Pistolero is where you want to be if you want to be like, 6 shooters. Well, there's no 6 shooters, but if you want that theme, that feel of the 6 shooter hero, the Pistolero.
Doc Holliday from Tombstone was definitely something I was thinking about while working on the Pistolero.
Yeah, the word Huckleberry just keeps jumping out every time I'm reading this class.
Before you go on, Perm, I do want to point out, I do like that each of the ways has a reload mechanic. That's basically, you get a freely reload if you do the thing that really defines your way.
Right.
It really encourages players to, to play up what that way is designed to do, and you get rewarded for it with
Which is
some action
brilliant
economy
game
bonus.
design. Which is brilliant game
Thank
design
you.
because reloading is a penalty for playing a character that uses an option. Like bows don't reload; bows get to just shoot. Reloading is a game balance penalty added to weapons that need to do it, and also for accuracy of the concept and theme. But by adding this cool reload ability, you get to be excited to do something that was once a punishment, and that particular game design nugget deserves a gold star.
Well, and then we go back to what you were saying about singular expertise making you bad at everything but guns. This is the reward for that. So when you're walking into battle, if you have a gun and you're a gunslinger and someone else has a gun and they're not a gunslinger, your expertise in being a gunslinger really shines with how quickly you can reload and get off extra shots.
And it's
I'll note
sorry.
bad is maybe I was just going to say I'll note that bad is maybe a little strong. They are still scaling on their secondary weapons at the same proficiency as a barbarian or a ranger or so bad might be a little strong, but not as good is certainly accurate.
Pretty sure the class feature is just bad at everything but guns.
So you're right that everyone has a reload thing and everybody has an initiative thing, which I think is really cool to tie it in. The next one is sniper, which one shot, one kill is their cool ability, which is the first attack they make of a combat gets extra damage. And that is what made me feel like a sniper during the gunplay. So I got like the biggest, slowest gun I could get that needed a tripod and I needed to set up, and I loved it because their initiative thing is you get to hide or take cover as part of your initiative roll. And so like dropping and throwing up that tripod and getting that first aim out is like it coded in the class, and I'm getting bonuses to do all of this. And then you just take your time, pop it off, and then a bad guy goes down, and that feels great. But I spent so many actions, it was kind of balanced, but it still felt great to pull it off every single time it happened. Then the final one is Vanguard, and this is the heavy weapon specialty. You got the shotgun. The shotgun's so big. Okay, the Vanguard wields weapons so big that they eventually can get an ability that it provides them a parry bonus just by being behind it. And that is wonderful.
Yeah, the play up close and personal, blast with big guns, all of the scatter and kickback weaponry, and some of these guns hit really hard.
This is the rocket tag class.
Yeah, it's going for really optimizing the action that you're supposed to do your thing. Right. And while leaving you a lot of room to figure out your exact flavor of that thing. Hopefully.
And I do like that the book continuously says like, hey, by the way, who else had a whole lot of guns and focus on gunpowder? Asia. So we made it a big part of our gun book because that makes sense. And like the very first sample class you get is this the fire lances? Is that what they're wielding? Am I getting that right?
I think you're looking at the drifter build, and I think he has hand cannons and nunchucks.
Okay, I thought that was
and nunchucks.
I thought that was a flint, and he was just getting ready.
Yeah, I thought it was a stick of dynamite.
But hey, nunchucks and hand cannons, absolutely. I saw this one and I was like, oh yeah. And this is definitely one of the ones you were talking about where they are standing on the barrels.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that piece we had Lyrianne brought back as the sample pistolero build there. She was graduated but not forgotten as we went into the book there. And then our sample sniper, that is the same character from the little flavor story that prefaces several of the chapter openings, starting with the guns characters, where he's a former shield marshal who's retired, and you get like a fun little. He kind of introduces you into each of these sections with his adventure. And then Nalmika, the dwarven iconic, with her dwarven scattergun and amazing Wayne Reynolds art. She is the vanguard of the builds.
Did the art inspire the Vanguard build? Because she always had that cannon from what we saw, and we never really had the build that said, like, this is what you definitely want if you want to walk around with a dwarven cannon.
It definitely played into it a bit, yeah. Maybe less the build as much as the specific dwarven scattergun, because we saw that art come in from Wayne, and we're like, that can't just be a blunderbuss. That is something special, just a blunderbuss. Yeah. Yeah, so I will say the art directly is the reason that there are stats for a dwarven scattergun in the game, and it influenced some of what we did with the Vanguard. Though that was something where we kind of had some ideas about maybe doing something along those lines, and then we had a lot of requests for it during the playtests, so that was like, okay, we're definitely going to do
that. Any final thoughts on the Gunslinger?
I was just disappointed that the Dwarven Scattergun wasn't just called the BFG.
You can't do that, Fair.
You can name it whatever you want for your character.
All right, then we get to the backgrounds. The background kind of has like a three-part theme. One of them is guns, one of them is black powder, and one of them is just kind of Western. Like The Undertaker isn't particularly a gun background, but I see why it's here. And I appreciate it.
They also help support some of the lore that we were bringing in for the Arcadia side of things. Like we talk about a character that I think started in Luis's campaign, the stone giant who like clobbers people with tombstones. And so there was some lore and some ideas and some stuff that all kind of played in. And while you're right, they're not all strictly guns backgrounds. They kind of play into the areas where we talk about guns if they don't touch guns directly.
We've got uncommon backgrounds. Is this the first time we've had uncommon backgrounds?
I don't believe so. I'm pretty sure we've had other uncommon backgrounds. But in the APG, it did just go common directly into rare. I want to say Secrets of Magic had some uncommon backgrounds, but now I'm realizing that I can't swear to that in this moment.
Oh. I kind of want to get you to swear to it, and then we'll check, but... but like you were saying, we've got Alkenstar Outlaw, Alkenstar Sojourner, so we've got a lot of the campaign setting coming into it, and then finally the rare backgrounds of the Otherworldly Mission, and the Revenant, and the Tall Tale.
I like the Tall Tale best. Because like my heritage growing up in rural America was the Jack Tales, the Tall Tales, the Paul Bunyans. Like that was like my childhood and mythology and stuff. And usually that type of storytelling is getting like more and more ignored as we're moving on. And this is the first time I've seen, like, I mean, Babe could just show up in this book and it would have been perfect.
I'm sorry, Babe the pig?
The big blue ox, a literally gigantic ox the size of a mountain.
You Americans are wacky.
Yeah, I mean, there's not actually stats for a lasso in here, but the Tall Tale was definitely, like, this is the person who, whether they did it or not, definitely is going to tell you a story about lassoing a tornado and riding it into the next town,
And archetypes. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, and a few of the uncommon archetypes will actually show up in the adventure releasing on the 27th, Headshot the Rot, a all gunslinger party pre-gen adventure set in Alkenstar. So a fun time to kind of check out some of the mechanics in this book and see them in action.
Is that the one with like a 50s movie theater in the background of the cover?
That is no longer the cover art,
Okay.
but yes,
Explain.
well, okay, so I wrote that adventure. I was not the developer on that adventure, and there was a lot going on, and I think that the artist just got theater and guns as kind of the key points of information for this piece and gave us an amazing, fantastic piece of art for a game we don't make.
Okay.
I thought, like, when I saw it, I thought, wait, they got the logo wrong again. This is the Starfinder one shot, right?
I was waiting for you to explain the time travel, basically, when you were summarizing the adventure.
Yeah, there is no time travel. If you
Okay.
look at the product page for it now, we've actually swapped that piece of art out for a replacement piece of art, which is much closer in tone and theme, if not having the specific characters we had hoped to have in there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Because, like, it definitely made it one of the more intriguing announcements when we saw it, but now it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Let's go into archetypes. We've got a lot of gun-related archetypes, as you might expect.
Yes. Yeah. The multi-class gunslinger there, and then a lot of things that play with the new mechanics we've introduced, like the artillerist is if you want to be the, hard-bitten artilleryman or individual who's, mans the cannon and forces the rest of the party to help you load it into the wagon when you travel from location to location. The beast gunners, which is more of our Arcadia lore and ties into some of the cool new items we made. The beast guns, which are these specific guns, which are pretty much literally made out of taxidermied animals or animal parts into weaponry. The bullet dancer, Dustin Knights.
This is the fan favorite.
Well, I will tell you that was in the outline as one of the things that I knew I was going to be assigning. A lot of freelancers who had thrown their hat in the ring for this project were very, very interested in that archetype. I ended up tapping Dustin Knight for it, and Dustin did, I think, a really great job. We came up with something really cool. It's kind of like the Drifter in that you're not just shooting all the time. You're kind of shooting and then pistol whipping and then shooting, reloading, and pistol whipping and doing that kind of rotation. The Demolitionist, one of my favorite pieces of art in the book. Sorry, I'm gonna pass it back to you now that I've said that.
So the bullet dancer, love it all. My favorite part is because I know of several of the anime and or movies that would have inspired this, but the bullet dancer reload, that particular feat is like the complete pinnacle of awesomeness that anybody who's playing a bullet dancing or a gunslinger character wants to reach, where you literally are throwing the bullets into the air and then catching them into your gun as part of your movement in combat.
Yes. Yeah, it's flashy and fun, and flashy and fun is something that was basically a design directive for this book, but the bullet dancer does it particularly well.
Good job, Dustin.
Yes. Speaking of flashy and fun, after the Demolitionist, we've got the fireworks technician. It's exactly what it sounds like. You set off fireworks displays. They do fun things in combat, like mess up things that are trying to fly overhead or dazzle people. It's kind of like a fun, flashy AoE / debuffer thing that, maybe your alchemist will be really interested in. Maybe we'll add a fun bit of spice onto a different type of character, whatever you want to do with it.
For anyone that complains that archetype dedication feats feel a little feat taxy, the firework technician dedication takes up most of a page.
It does.
I hadn't noticed that till now, but oh my gosh.
It does a lot. It it is one of the reasons that another archetype ended up being dissected and sprinkled across several archetypes so that we could free up page space. But I think honestly, one thing this book taught me is that I'm not a big fan of one-page archetypes. There is a time and a place where a one-page archetype is called for, but a two-page archetype I feel like just gives you a lot of room to actually hit the flavor and feel like you got the full taste of what you wanted and not just enough to kind of tease you and leave you wanting more, you know.
Well, I was complimenting you on your sidebars earlier, and a lot of these sidebars show up in these archetypes, which you really only have room for because there is a second page for most of them.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Pistol Phenom is like, I just picture the Wild West show that belongs next to this character. Like, does it come with the entire circus?
That is entirely dependent on the campaign, but I bet if your GM is getting ready to run Extinction Curse, you would not feel out of place as a Pistol Phenom. Yeah. The sniping duo, one of my personal favorites. Like I said, something that I went into this book, and a real major goal for me was like, I want sniping to be a thing that is balanced and fun and that you want to do. And, you know, in a game where 3 actions and proficiencies and hit point scaling and all of these other things play so many roles in how fights are supposed to play out, projected damage, outputs, everything else. It was tricky, but I knew we could do it. And I think the 2 sniping options in here, the sniper on the gunslinger and the sniping duo, which you could put on a sniping gunslinger, or you could put it on ranger with a crossbow, whatever other kind of character wants to play long range and coordinate with a party member. I really like them. I hope everybody who gets to play with them does as well.
Now, you were talking about how the Overwatch walks up to the line of being a little off balance, but doesn't cross it. If a sniping duo chooses an Overwatch character as their spotter, how are we doing for balance?
I think that you will discover that tactics really are how you optimize in PF2, and you've got 2 characters that are very good at leveraging tactics.
Okay.
Spell shot's back.
Yes. So the spell shot is your magical gunslinger. It is actually a way and then a selection of feats that go with it. I originally wrote it up as not a class archetype. It was just another way, but we realized it was kind of weird because there were a lot of feats that we wanted to do where you kind of had to be the magical gunslinger and not some other type of gunslinger. And there were, you know, the spell shot does a lot. You can recall knowledge on your reloads, and then you also get elemental damage, and you can cycle and pick the type of elemental damage that you need. So it's really good at finding and then exploiting weaknesses in enemies. And it's also where like all of the feats where, you know, somebody rolled their eyes at me when I was like, you know what would be cool? What if you shot one enemy and then shot another, and you made them like switch places, or you shot one and teleported next to them, or, you know, all of these kind of big magical shots that aren't spells, but have that kind of effect.
I love Face Bullet, where it's just like you shoot at somebody and it goes through everything that isn't your target and then hits them.
Yes, yeah. That archetype is very much a combination of me and Luis. Luis wrote one gun mage archetype, and most of its component pieces ended up split between the spell shot and the beast gunner, and then supplemented by whatever Mark and I felt needed to be added in there to round those out and make them complete. I like it a lot. It's fun. I have high hopes of playing a spell shot in Strength of Thousands, but since I wrote book 5 of Strength of Thousands, I think I'm going to have to GM that instead. So it's always
spell shot is just a way at like a student exchange program for a book.
That's right.
Book 5, they're probably not students anymore, right?
No, they're academy instructors at that point. They've been at the Magambia for a while and are, you know, entrusted with stuff you wouldn't entrust students with.
Does the Magambia believe in sabbaticals?
One would imagine. It seems like a very progressive institute.
There are ways.
Yes,
is what I'm saying.
One of the ways is the spell shot.
That's right.
I do want to mention that this chapter is I've been waiting for this chapter to come out for a while because
We're talking about Gears equipment. Which chapter?
No, the archetypes for the guns section, because the last time we got this chapter was in Ultimate Combat, where it was almost 100 pages of how to give other classes guns with the same kind of rules being written over and over again, which were very cool, but could have been wrapped up in 2 pages if PF2's archetype system had existed back then. So instead of getting 100 pages of how paladins use gun and how wizards use gun and how rangers use guns and how fighters use guns by being a gunslinger, you instead get this whole bunch of section of really cool archetypes that a lot of different characters can tap into. And we would have lost 90% of these opportunities under Pathfinder First Edition's archetype system.
Yeah. PF2 really is just incredibly efficient with archetypes. You know, your 2 pages of PF2 archetype is worth like 40 pages of PF1 archetype because it's, you know, equal to archetype times number of classes in play that can use it, right? Versus, like you said, a gunslinging archetype for this version of character and a gunslinging archetype for this version of character, et cetera, and so on, all needing to exist in different buckets. There is one more archetype in this section, and the forums really seem to like it, the unexpected sharpshooter. And this is the one where maybe you're really lucky or maybe you're really skilled and you try to hide that fact from people. But you do the things where, let's see, you fire your gun once, creating a devastating and unpredictable chain of events. Perhaps your bullet strikes exactly the right spot on a water tower, causing it to flood and incite a stampede of horses, which knock over a lantern that sets a city on fire. Whatever the exact chain reaction, and no matter how improbable, the indiscriminate catastrophe creates significant challenges for your enemies across a wide area while leaving everyone else alone. That is its feat chain reaction, which is a 12th level feat, but that's also a pretty good summation of the archetype in general.
So what I'm thinking, you take the time travel archetype from Secrets of Magic, and it's someone who comes to the past and it's like nothing matters. It will always end up working the way it is predestined to work. And then the unexpected sharpshooter proves them right.
I like that character idea.
All right, well, I'll see you in the something of thousands. Shoot, what's the name of the adventure path in the Magambia?
Strength of Thousands.
Strength of Thousands. Thank you. Well, I was going to make a joke that we would play in that adventure path, but it's ruined because I screwed up the name. I'm sorry, everybody.
I still appreciated the effort. I really did.
Okay, well, it wasn't the effort that was the problem. All right, guns equipment. I think we could skip the firearms and go, or the classic firearms. Sorry, we're not skipping firearms. We're skipping classic firearms, getting into the fantasy firearms. We've got the beast guns.
I want to say that there are a lot more firearms this time than there were last time. There are like almost double the number of different types of firearms than PF1 version of this had.
Yeah, or the playtest. There's a very significant number of the classic firearms, and a few of them, they're showing up for the first time in this book, like that dwarven scattergun or the goblin fling flenser, which is basically an egg-shaped tube with a hatch in the back that you throw a leather packet of saw blades and charge into, and then fire. It's scatter. It does slashing. It's a hot mess. There is a goblin using a fling flenser in Headshot the Rot. So again, if you want to see some of this stuff in action, check that out. But the beast guns, yes.
So when this was introduced, or when the concept was introduced in the build up to this book, I assumed these were going to be living beasts that you've weaponized, possibly are using as familiars. I did not expect them to be taxidermied, and you're just squeezing the fire out of a fire-breathing creature's lungs. So what's going on with beast guns?
Yeah, so these are Arcadian weapons, and they're part of this idea of really big magic. You know, there's rituals that you get in the game, and they've got a nice little stat block, and it tells you one person does this and one person does that. But the idea of ritual magic was something that we thought could potentially be a lot bigger. And, you know, what if a ritual, like, instead of you making a skill check, you have to go out and you have to hunt a creature under certain conditions. Like, it has to be a fair fight. You can't bring a bunch of people with you to hunt down a weaker monster. It has to be part of this whole process. And that process leads you to the beast guns, which, you know, you've got like the breath blaster. So it's got to be a monster that had a breath weapon, and you've gone and you've defeated it, or you've found a beast gun that somebody else made or inherited one. The archetype ties into these. You don't have to take the archetype to use these. And it works as a gun, but then also you can use it to fire its breath weapon. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. The Drake rifles, which fire a line of whatever energy type Drake you used in the making of it. The growth gun, which is, you know, the you made it out of a troll or a hydra or something with regenerate, and so it actually is constantly regrowing its own bullets inside it that you then shoot out. The
Those are
spike
just
launcher,
teeth, aren't they?
yes, they're teeth. Yeah, they're
Ooh.
very much teeth. Yeah. The spike launcher, which is a manticore tail that constantly regrows spikes so you can shoot them.
I like the basilisk gun, the petrification cannon.
Yes. Yeah. Not a bad way to deal with a threat turning into stone, right?
We've got Art of the Spider Gun, right? That's what starts, I believe, even the whole gun chapter. We've got Bristol using it on somebody.
We definitely have Art of the Spider Gun in here. It is used, I think it's actually in the Arcadia opening piece. She's holding a spider gun. Page
No,
206, Arcadia Beast Guns and Sky Medals, maybe? Or which one are you looking at?
102.
102.
Page 102. We see, if you're just looking at Mauricio, she just looks like she's fired a shot. If you look at her victim, though, he's been webbed to the wall.
Yes. That is actually not a spider gun. That is the glue bullets from the ammunition section.
Also makes sense. So
Yes.
There's a lot of ways to be a Spider-Man gunslinger in this.
Yeah, there's a couple routes to a few really entertaining concepts, I think. After the beast guns, we've got the cobbled firearms. These are basically, they're not all goblin guns, but they're all guns a goblin would be really interested in because they're wildly unstable and have really big effects. Usually you want the good big effect, but the bad big effect is kind of cool, at least to see it happen once, as long as it doesn't end very poorly for the party.
We've got the combination weapons, which you were talking about earlier.
Yep, these are your melee weapons that are coordinated with a gun. So they have a couple traits that are unique to them, the combination traits, and that basically just covers how do these things work together, how do you actually use them. And then critical fusion, where when you're using the melee portion of the weapon and you get a critical hit, you can do things like fire the gun. And you actually get a little bit of choice there. You can fire the gun off so that the bullet doesn't hit them, but goes off next to them, and they get the big, loud, kind of stunning effect. Or you can do the, I actually hit you, and now my barrel is lined up directly with you, so I'm going to pull the trigger for some more bullet damage. And that kind of stuff. They're just versatile, mix it up weapons. They've got the efficiency like we were talking about. If you only need to rune up them once. Whereas with some of the classic guns, you can put a reinforced stock on there and a bayonet and cool stuff like that. But then those are actually separate weapons that need to be runed up separately. So there's a few different paths you can take to get to where you're going, depending on what works best for you and also what fits your immersion best, right? Because some people can be there for the reinforced stock and the bayonet, but when it's a scimitar grafted to, an elf gun, that might be the one step too far. It's not for me.
Zaxil in chat. Oh, I'm showing off a miniature. Zaxil in chat is saying, is there a way to do a shield gun? I mean, you could just take a Vanguard. The way of the Vanguard.
Looking for a way to use this miniature I've had for years, and she's got an axe musket, and now I can.
Yep, it's there. It's in there. I mentioned that kind of like the wackiest gun in the game is in here, and so normally I try really hard. I make stuff I think is cool, but I try to like stop short of just putting stuff that I personally want to play to into published products, unless I have like a really good reason to believe everybody else wants to play with it too. The three-peaked tree is in this book for me and anyone else who has the kind of love for wacky off-the-wall weapons in their hearts that I do, because it's a trident where the middle tine is a gun and it's got a tethered length of silk so that you can throw it and whip it back into your hand. And also in the guns deck, it is illustrated with one of the most amazing piece of art I have ever seen. So keep an eye out for that in March.
I'm surprised you showed restraint and only had one of the three prongs being a gun.
Balance came into play at some point. You'll notice there are capacity weapons like the mace multi-pistol, where it is both a mace and also several pistols.
I liked the progression when you're reading the stat block and it's like a gun sword. Oh, I know that. A hammer gun, a mace multi-pistol. Where are we going with all this?
On a wonderful journey into a fantasy land that combines magic and firearms.
And ends with an explosive dog slicer.
When do I get a scattergun that shoots wands of fireball?
That shoots wands of fireballs? If you had said fireballs, I would have been like, one day our dreams will come true. But shoots wands of fireballs, I'm less certain. I don't have a good answer for that.
I like that you're just like shooting a projectile and it stabs someone with a wand of fireball. And then you go and retrieve it, and then you blow them up.
Yeah. And then after the combination weapons, we jump into the rare and unique magic firearms. And so these are all weapons that have big stories, like the Arboreal's Revenge, where the wood for the gun stock was actually made from an arboreal, which is a living tree creature, like an ent. And so now it haunts this gun that is made out of part of its body. And the intelligent firearms, like the Boastful Hunter, which really genuinely believes it is the best weapon out there and constantly pushes you to go hunt more and more dangerous game, and will openly mock you in front of other people if you aren't doing that on a regular enough basis to appease it. Or the Sunken Pistol, which wants to go treasure hunting and can cast water breathing on you, but if you haven't been doing a bunch of treasure hunting, you probably shouldn't trust it to cast water breathing on you, because it's going to find its own owner one way or the other who will do the things it wants it to do.
These seem like...
They seemed fun to write.
Yes. I'm not sure I want to use these guns.
The cursed,
put them in boxes for my players to have.
The cursed guns and the rare guns are definitely tools for the GM to introduce into the game world, more so than they are necessarily things that the players are going to be hunting after. At least those ones. There is some other cool stuff, that we've got, like the Reaper's Grasp, which is made out of metal from one of the final blades in Galt. And if you're curious about why there is metal from the final blades in Galt laying around to be turned into a gun, there is an adventure that I believe Ron Lundeen wrote, maybe called something like Night of the Grey Death, maybe, that has that answer. Yes, Night of the Grey Death.
So just came out, right?
It did, I believe so. Yeah. Time means nothing to me between COVID and publishing schedules, but that sounds right.
Yeah, I think I got it in the same shipment as this in Grand Bazaar, and the hardcovers got all my attention.
Yeah. And speaking of Ron Lundeen, he also wrote the Pistol of Wonder, if you happened to see that. Yeah, it's a rod of wonder, but also it's a gun. and it doesn't just latch on to the Rod of Wonder table. It has its own array of effects, including transforming you into a Triceratops, and your forward horn is the gun. That is, I believe that is entirely on Ron, and I just saw it and was like, yeah, I'm gonna let that through. I'm not. I too have watched Herculoids as a child and am totally fine with this. So yeah, and then after that we kind of go into ammunition, and then all of the other stuff that supplements and is maybe not so much the focus of your character as the other stuff or the focus of a story, but is all of the cool little tools and toys and things that you'll expound with. The Gunslinger has some feats for actually making alchemical bullets, and this is where you're going to find your alchemical bullets. Things like that glue bullet you were seeing, black powder and its various sizes and forms that you can purchase for it. Other fun stuff like that, and sanguinating ammunition, shoot somebody and make them bleed profusely.
We were talking about words that always make us cringe. Sanguinating is not a word you come across too often, but ugh.
Yes. Yeah, some words just sound terrible to say, and justly so. After the ammunition, black powder siege weapons, just like in the gears section where we had the catapults and the springholds. These are the cannons and the bombards and the hwacha and all that kind of cool stuff. The big rare Alkenstar cannons that you really only find in Alkenstar, and siege towers and things like that.
I've seen some people questioning if this was the right book for siege weapons, or if it should have been saved for an ultimate campaign type that introduces like mass combat.
I think it kind of depends on what you want. The siege weapons that are in this book, they function at party scale, right? If you're a 4-man group, you can use the vast majority of the siege weapons and stuff that are in here. And one of the things that is maybe not immediately obvious from the outside, but from the inside out, the DCs and the damage values and things that we put on these, they're actually scaled to walls of various hardnesses and substances based on the levels you're going to encounter them. Logan did these, and so I believe that this is the correct place for these if what you are looking for is siege weapon rules that you can drop into a game and start running with immediately. Like if the party wants to cut down a battering ram to knock down the castle doors, these are the rules for that. And I don't think those are mass combat rules necessarily, right? I think there is more room to grow this, but I think the really fun thing about this is I'll be honest with you, I've almost never used siege weapon rules in a D20 system because they all end up being too cumbersome, or I end up spending the entire session teaching the party how they work. And then the next session, we all come back to actually do the thing, and half the party's forgotten. So I say, screw it, and I wing it at party scale anyways, right? Like, I mean, that is the bulk of my experience with siege weapons. And I think the great thing about these is that they drop and play at the same scale that you otherwise play the game at.
They're also good in this book for, like, not for sieges, but they're great for, it's time for the turret encounter.
Correct.
Where, like, the party has 3 cannons on this wall, and the horde of zombies is coming down that hallway. You do the math.
Right. Yeah, we didn't use these rules, but in year 1 of Pathfinder Society, there's an adventure where you flee a giant moth monster and you fire cannons on the ship at it, and that is kind of the scale that these really shine at.
Param, I have to step away for a minute. Can you take over?
Right.
All right.
Wonderful. After we get through the siege weapons, we get to the customization options in the tools and accessories, which is this is where you can add the scope to your rifle. What kind of customization, like why was customization options important for this book, and how did you come up with them?
There were actually a lot of kind of factors that came into play there. One is that, personalization of firearms is a big part of the story of firearms. And now guns are largely mass produced, but even with that, people still tend to swap out stocks and other pieces to customize their guns to the degree that suits them best, especially here in America. And then also, there's this kind of question. The Gunslinger has all of these great reloads for firearms and crossbows, and that really helps you doing the thing you want to do. But there are some people who are still kind of like, but why not just use a bow? Why not just use a bow? Well, I think there are several answers to that question, but this is a few more answers to that question as well, right? Because you have this modularity, because you have a very unique way to make your firearm or your crossbow really your own to a greater degree than you can necessarily make a bow. And that includes the different types of scopes that you can put on there, different types of holsters and bandoliers that you can use if you maybe use more than one gun. And things like the large bore modifications and the air cartridge firing system, and all of these things. The level of customization that is there for crossbows and firearms, I think, means that there's really just so many paths you can kind of explore to what is the right weapon and the right mix of options for my character. And it kind of makes your weapon, even if you're not an inventor, it's really fun to be like, well, I've got a crossbow and I put a reinforced stock on it because I want that on there. And I've got my dark vision scope and I've got my custom, ammunition in these arrays and etc. Or your firearm and you carry around an extra underwater firing mechanism for it because every now and then that's going to come in handy, right? Yeah.
One of these, like, I before we started streaming, I mentioned it, but one of these made me giggle the second I read it. Which is the immovable tripod, which is literally just a tripod mount strapped to an immovable rod so that you can just like put it anywhere. And screw gorilla pods. I want one of those next time I'm going to Gen Con so I can set the camera up where I need it.
Yep. Yeah, get any angle you need thanks to the immovable rod.
That's one of the magic items that players love to get because they never use it the way that's supposed to be used. It's always about the weird, wacky ways that you can use the immovable rod.
Yeah, there are some items where they have this very basic function, but the story behind them is just so kind of titillating that like you wanna play with it. You wanna see how far you can push the story with it. And the immovable rod is so much that item. I remember watching, I think it was like a Nonat stream where he was talking about how like they pinned a giant spider down and then somebody just put an immovable rod on top of it and activated it, and I was immediately like, yeah, I'd let that fly as a GM. I'd run with that. That seems really fun.
Yeah, I had a player once that loved to combine it with a tower shield to make a portable press.
Nice. Yeah. We also have a whole lot of talismans in here. One of these talismans I've actually been using quite a lot as my kind of standard loadout. I'm playing a thaumaturge with a rapier pistol in a Strange Aeons conversion right now.
Nice.
And the adaptive cogwheel is really fun for when I need to swap to a different kind of gun for the situation, because it just lets you, it's a little gear that reconfigures your gun into a different type of gun for a minute.
That's cool. I was hoping you were going to say the Shrieking Skull is the talisman you've been using a lot.
I mean, it's a good one.
But it's a great visual. That's the main reason that I was hoping that's the one you were going for.
Yeah, it is probably the best visual of them all because it is literally a shrieking skull.
Now we are coming up on time, and we still have rotating gear left.
We've kind of been talking about how it fits into the campaign as we go.
Yeah. So before is there anything that we haven't touched on already in the rotating gear that you want to draw some attention to, Mike?
It has new dwarf ancestry feats in the Dongenhold and Alkenstar section. Those are dwarf ancestry feats that are tailored specifically to dwarves from those areas. And that includes things like having a clan pistol instead of a clan dagger as your starting weapon, and being appropriately proficient with that. And having other abilities that kind of really lean on the fact that your background is heavily tied to explosives, black powder, and guns, and being from that part of the world. But other than that, yeah, we already talked about this goes deeper into Arcadia than any other book we've got. We talk about Tian Sha, the Jiskin Imperium, all of these places that we've been mentioning throughout the stream. This is where that information is all kind of centered and gone into in depth, even though it's mentioned and sprinkled throughout. This is where that is ultimately going to push you if you want to get really deep into how do these things fit into Golarion and what do they look like on Golarion.
That's Guns and Gears. It's a super fun book if this is the type of content you are comfortable with in your game. You probably should have addressed somewhere what to do if you're not comfortable with this content in your game. I feel like that was a real missed. You talk about it a lot, Mike. You're supposed to laugh and be like, "Oh, you."
Well, I mean, the gunslinger can use crossbows instead of firearms, and that's just baked right in. And part of that is because I will tell you, I played a couple bolt aces in PF1 solely because I wanted to play with gunslinger mechanics, and I had GMs who would not let guns into their campaigns.
Those GMs.
Well, and so we were like, well, there is literally no reason that can't just be baked directly into the core gunslinger class, right? And then that way, if you're like, I want to do all this big shooting and I want to play a sniper and I want to have these big abilities, but I can't use guns, well then don't, just use a crossbow and pretty much everything works. There's a few items that just thematically don't make any sense if you're not shooting a gun versus a crossbow, and those only work with guns, but by and large you've still got a nice robust class for it. But if that's not enough for you, there may be some people for who there is no value in this book. We tried to make it as useful to as many people as possible and put so much great stuff in here for everybody, regardless of kind of what your tolerance for, technical levels in your world is. But if that tolerance is 0, this might not be the book for you.
This ended up being a much more fun book than I was expecting. I really enjoyed just the experience of flipping through it, which is something like, you get a hardcover book for a role-playing game line and you are expecting to like options and to see characters as you're reading it, but it's always fun when it's a joy to read.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Well, we'll be right back.
We'll be right back to wrap things up after this. Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
And I'm back twice.
Am I back?
No, I'm fixing it. It.
Oh, there's much
and we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 261 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. Before we go, we got a little bit of news that we're going to slip into the shout-outs.
Yeah.
This is going to be one gigantic shout-out section because some absolutely fantastic and surprising news broke earlier this week. Late last week, when it was announced that Paizo employees are unionizing. There is the United Paizo Workers Union, which can be found, or information about it can be found at unitedpaizoworkers.org. But essentially, the majority of the non-manager Paizo staffers, so that's about 50 people, the majority of them have signed on to a union, and they are working towards better standards, better work standards, better pay, better representation and the Paizo accountability that has been talked about since right before Gen Con.
I mean, I've been really like shouting that this needed to happen for years and years and years now. Ever since I heard about, like, not even just Paizo, but just like how rough it is to be a game designer in the tabletop field, how much this is needed. And then like when when Paizo accountability stuff came up, it's like, well, the best possible outcome of this is a Paizo union for the employees, so they can have some representation and say in what's going on in the company. And so when this news broke, I was just like, yay, I can't believe it might actually happen. Now, where they are at in the process as of the last time I checked, which was this morning, is that they've declared their intent to unionize. They have the initial signers, but this has not gone to a formal vote yet.
Really garbled, Param. I can barely understand you.
No.
Yeah.
It says my internet connection is unstable. It's like it showed up on my
That's what it looks like.
Screen. Hold on, give it a moment. It has been coming back. Oh, the stream is having a rough time.
You're already sounding a little better.
Oh no, the stream is having rough. It hit 0. It hit 0.
Yee.
Oh
yeah,
0's bad.
Right now.
It's coming back.
It sounds bad.
Oh no! Come on, chugga. You can do it, little internet. You can do it. Please come back to me. Oh, for anybody who's getting any of this garbled audio, it's my ISP has given me a fun little notice that says, "We're working to upgrade your experience. Expect outages." I'm not sure how those two sentences work together, but yeah, this is the worst time for this to have happened.
The stream now, and it looks terrible.
Oh, God.
But somehow we just gained 3 viewers.
No, come on! It's going like to 0 and then coming back.
Yeah.
And then going back down and then coming back.
Should we switch to local recordings so at least the podcast listeners hear this section?
Wait,
Bart Wannabe says they hear us.
Oh, they just don't see us.
Should we just turn off video?
I'm going to turn off my video. You keep yours up. Because,
okay.
Boom. There we go. I should immediately start sounding better to you.
You immediately started sounding better to me.
Fantastic. Okay, so they can hear us, but seeing us is rough. All right. So this was when I heard about Paizo accountability, I thought that the best possible outcome of this would be a formation of a Paizo union so that the employees could represent themselves better and have some say in what's going on here. A lot of people were calling for like human relations to happen. With a company the size of Paizo, there should be HR. Okay, just straight up. But HR's job is to protect the company in the interest of the company, not the individual employees. Like in cases, sometimes that does mean protecting the company from the bad actions of some management and executives, absolutely. But HR doesn't exist to have your best interest at heart. HR exists to make sure that the company continues to work and function correctly. A union has your interest at heart. That's the reason it exists. And so I'm very happy to see this. And that where they are at in the process right now is that they have declared intent and they have signees, but they haven't done the official vote yet. And they're hoping that Paizo voluntarily recognizes the union. If they don't, how it works here in the States is that they would then go through a process where they formally vote. And if the vote is successful, then the union forms. And then Paizo has to recognize it as a union body. We're really hopeful that they voluntarily recognize it. Most companies don't like doing that traditionally in America, so there's that. But then the other shoe dropped. The other very big shoe, which is that a group of freelancers, more than 40 of them, who are the biggest names in freelancing for Paizo, have organized separately from this and had done a concerted action, which is a strike without a union, where they have stopped work for Paizo when the Paizo accountability stuff had come, and they had a list of demands, but they have since updated the demands to they will go back to work immediately if Paizo voluntarily recognizes the new union.
Yeah,
which, as far as I'm concerned, is checkmate, because Paizo doesn't work without freelancers. Paizo doesn't exist without books being published. They kind of have to at this point, right?
Yeah, the freelancers have stood strong with their position. They are working on a united front. And just between the union and the freelancers, it just feels like everyone is making the absolute right choices. They are handling this in a professional and, like, I guess, proper way. And it really is like there is no finger you can point being like, oh, you're doing the bad action, you're doing anything here. It really is just like, all you have to do is represent people who want to be taken care of in a more in a better way, just in a more fair way.
Right. This isn't going to be a magic bullet that makes everything all better immediately, but it does mean that right now, the way it works is the executives have all the decision-making power at Paizo, and the employees can either do it or leave. And we have lost many of the brightest minds at Paizo, but for various reasons that may not have happened if there had been a Paizo union in place. We might still have the Crystal Frasers and the others.
Sean K. Randall,
I don't want to name specifically.
Wes James.
Yeah. If there had been a union to address some of these issues and to at least make them feel that they have a voice in how the company is making some of the decisions, to have some bargaining power, and they don't right now. And I'm hopeful that this means that, like, it is about bargaining. The union will be collectively negotiating with the executive to come to concessions, and they won't. It's unlikely that either side gets everything they want out of the resolution here. And this might still be just like the very beginning of a long and protracted set of stress and negotiations and stuff going forward. But at least it's a step, and it means that we can have some hope that things can get better for the people that make the game we love.
So I'm going to share some links in chat. We've got unitedpaizoworkers.org is the union's website. It has a blog. They've been updating it with just how things are going and clarifying any questions that they've been receiving. There's the supportpaizoworkerscard.org, which has been independently created. Like, it's independent of Paizo. This is just people who believe in the message, and we're very well associated with the Paizo accountability hashtag that was going around. Jason Tondro has been making the circuit. He appeared on the Banff podcast in an episode called Paizo Union Chat with Jason Tondro and Owen Casey Stevens. Then he appeared on Black Dragon Gaming in an episode called Talking #Unionize Paizo with senior developer Jason Tondro. And he also appeared on #Unionize Paizo with Jason Tondro. This is an episode of Rise of the Rule Lords podcast. So Jason was going around. He is an excellent person to speak on this. He knows his stuff. He's eloquent, and he's just a very fair-minded person. And so you get a great idea of what is being asked for, why what they're asking is realistic, and just how things are going. And we, of course, are also planning on covering that in place of next week's, what it was originally scheduled to be a Geek Together and then became a makeup episode for No Direction Beyond, has now been replaced with a special that you'll be hosting dedicated to talking about the Paizo Union movement.
And we'll definitely be having some of the freelancers in for that chat, as well as a representative from UPW. The exact makeup of that panel is still being put together, so I can't say exactly who will be there, but yeah, we'll have representatives from the freelancers and from UPW.
I've got a list of other things I should. I was going to say I'm going to pass on the rest of my shoutouts, but no, I really should cover some of these things. I will delete this one, but we launched Infinite Possibilities last week, and if I don't shout out to that, then it is taking for granted a lot of hard work that the Paizo staff put together to have the definitive blog, the definitive support articles for people that might be interested in participating in Pathfinder and Starfinder Infinite. So, Infinite Possibilities was a project that was headlined by Alex Guinness with participation from Owen K.C. Stevens, Dustin Knight, Ron Lundeen, Vanessa Hoskins, Jessica Redicop, Rigby Bendel, Kate Baker, Dennis Muldoon, Dave Nelson, and Isis Wozniakowska. Wozniakowska. And unfortunately, I have not spoken with them directly, so I apologize for the pronunciation there. But anyway, Infinite Possibilities is a series of over half a dozen blog posts talking about the things you should be considering if you want to participate in Pathfinder Infinite, which is Paizo's new community content program. And so Owen summarizes what Infinite even is. And then Alex talks about building a business, which he has done with Everybody Games. Tools of the trade. So different programs he uses that help him with the layout and the graphic design of the products he releases. Dustin wrote about becoming a Galarian historian because one of the major advantages of participating in Pathfinder Infinite and Starfinder Infinite, as opposed to third-party publishing, is that you get to play with Galarian. You get to play with the Pathfinder campaign setting, not just the Pathfinder role-playing game rules. Ron Lundeen and Alex talk about hiring freelancers because even though you are probably doing the majority of the writing on your own, not with a partner or with a team, you want artists, you want editors, you want people to help you out with this. And so if you are looking for freelancers, they talk about the resources and the proper way to deal with freelancers, what's fair, what's a proper way to treat them. Vanessa Hoskins talked about infinite freelancing for fun and maybe profit. And then Jessica Redicop and the series of freelancers that I was talking about talked about under Finder's hood. So basically understanding the Pathfinder and Starfinder mechanics and how to write for them in case this is your first time doing any design work for the system for public consumption. It is an amazing resource that Alex helped spearhead, and we have a new tab along the top of the website. It's called Infinite Possibilities Between Articles and Events, and it will be there for a long time, I guess, as long as the Infinite program exists. So if people need to use this resource and want to refer back to these articles, they are there. And it might get added to as well. Right now, this was the main volley that we got out on the same day as Pathfinder Infinite and Starfinder Infinite launched. And I think that the team put together something pretty incredible here.
This is an amazing resource for Infinite or any third-party publication or independent publication that you would want to do for a tabletop game. Like it's definitely focused on Infinite, but this is a team that has made some of the most incredible tabletop content that's out there, giving you the real knowledge of how to do this and how to succeed at it and have the best chance. If you have any curiosity about how this is done, any interest in doing any third-party stuff, or just want to understand what's going through the heads of the people that are making this content, you need to read these articles. They're invaluable.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we've got former Paizo employees, current Paizo employees. We've got freelancers who have worked on all of the games that they're talking about. Like, the No Direction Network is really fortunate to have access to an incredible pool of talent, and we have tapped into that pool like never before for the Infinite Possibilities project.
Right. And I am super, super, super proud of the team that put this together. Y'all did great.
And speaking of No Direction talent, we are adding a staff member. We can officially announce now that Scott DeYoung, longtime Pathfinder contributor, by way of freelancing, he will be joining the No Direction Network every other Wednesday. Actually, the Wednesdays that line up with the No Direction podcast. he will be releasing More Lore, which is a blog that expands on the tantalizing bits of lore that are hinted at in campaign setting material. So things that have not been followed up on in official releases and are not the kind of areas of the world that tend to get a lot of love. Scott wants to focus on them, wants to talk about how you can expand on those kinds of hints in your own game. He is a big fan of the Pathfinder campaign setting and of lore in general. So that's not the type of article we've ever had before. I'm really excited for it. He is really excited about it. He called me boss the other day. I didn't really know how to take it. But if it wasn't for just like getting the scheduling to work out, he probably could have gotten something out even earlier than 2 weeks from now, Wednesday. But that is his official launch. I'll probably be writing a blog article about it on Monday when I do the latest Recall Knowledge, which I will be renaming any day now. But yeah, it's always nice when the network expands, and Scott DeYoung is somebody who has like an incredible reputation, an incredible body of work that he is adding to the No Direction Network, and we are growing in more ways than just one additional staff member by having him come on board.
I was super elated when you even mentioned that it was a possibility that Scott could join us.
Yeah, and he's the one that proposed it to me when we were talking about the recent guest blogger takeover. He was just like, and hey, if you want me to come on more or even full time, that's a conversation I'm willing to have. And it's like, that is a conversation I'm definitely willing to have too, Scott. And then we had that conversation, and now here we are. All right, Param, we are about ready to wrap things up. Do you think you have a patron's private sanctum in you?
I'm going to try it because we owe it to him. And hey, if my internet goes bad, you can at least carry it.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who don't know, what are we talking about?
Well, first, we want to thank all of the people that support No Direction Network and help us make this content and bring it to you all. And we are only able to do that thanks to the wonderful support of our familiars, our patrons. And you can support us at patreon.com/No Direction. And for those patrons, they get to participate and listen to a show called the Private Sanctum, which is the No Direction After Party, where we will talk about whatever our patrons ask us to talk about. That is the gist. Whatever y'all want us to talk about, we will do it. You can join. If you join Patreon, you can hop in our Discord channel for a private chat to join us live. And if you can't join us live, the recordings are posted directly to Patreon afterwards for you to listen to there. It's become one of my favorite parts of the network for sure. Just getting to talk with y'all about, I have no idea what you're going to ask me to talk about. Well, some weeks I know, but other weeks I don't. And it's always great. So do so, go to nodirectionpodcast.com, click on the Patreon link there, go to patreon.com/private. So patreon.com/nodirection, support us there. And you'll find the Discord link at nodirectionpodcast.com right next to the Patreon link.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.